Welcome to Outdoorsy, the podcast where we are redefining what it means to be outdoorsy and reclaiming the word itself. I'm your host, Madeleine. Today, I am thrilled to welcome someone who's not only an adventurer, but also a very passionate advocate for our outdoor education and stewardship, Mikayla. As an outdoor educator and artist, former park ranger, Mikayla brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table, helping people connect with nature in meaningful ways. Her work is all about teaching others how to care for the land, respect wildlife, and truly immerse themselves in the natural world we so love. Whether she's leading outdoor education programs, creating art or content inspired by the landscape she loves, Mikayla's mission is to inspire us all to be better stewards of the environment. Her experience has given her a really unique perspective on how we can foster just a deeper connection to the outdoors while also protecting it for future connections, for future generations. Mikayla, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be on and chatting about outdoorsy stuff. I could yap all day about this. So,
Right. I
we'll
know.
try
I
and keep
feel
it
like,
condensed.
yeah, if we let these podcast episodes go forever, they'd be like 5 hours each. So we'll
Mhm.
try to save our viewers and listeners' ears and stay on track. But I'm so happy you're here. Let's just jump into the first question, which is just tell me about your relationship to the outdoorsy community, and just kind of the outdoorsy world in general.
Yeah, so for me, the outdoors have been a foundation of who I am as a person and where I feel the most comfortable and like myself. The community as a whole has its pros and cons, but finding my people who view the outdoors in a similar way has led to some of the best friendships I could ever ask for. So I'm very connected with the community, very immersed in it. I've seen almost every single side of it from being an outdoorsy person myself and an outdoorsy professional.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'd love to dig into like hearing about your professional side of it as well, because I think that's so unique and interesting. Like you have such a very valuable perspective to provide us. But before we get to like current day stuff,
Mhm.
did you grow up loving the outdoors, or is it something you learned later in life?
I grew up loving the outdoors and from camping trips with my family as a kid, hiking, fishing. I even did archery hunting with my dad for a while in my early teen years. Um, that's like a whole other topic, but my relationship with the outdoors has definitely evolved over time, especially after getting into the professional side of things, and going back to university for conservation biology and ecology. I can see things from many different points of view, which helps me understand and listen to people, but it can also create a great deal of conflict in my mind between the understanding and what I personally think about something.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I would love to like dig into that a little bit deeper too. Can you elaborate a little bit about what you mean about that conflict in your mind?
Yeah, so in the professional world, we have this thing called the authority of the resource. So that basically just means um, a person in uniform has the authority to dictate in the professional setting whether or not somebody's doing something good or bad. And it can be hard to separate that because these days people are literally crazy and you don't want to get yourself in any kind of trouble. So having more of a minding my own business on my personal time mindset has really saved me in a lot of situations. And if it's something that's just really egregious, then you can take pictures, get the location, license plates help if you can, um, just like photos of evidence and things if it's like really egregious. But if it's just something silly, try to put it to the back of your brain. Like, let's say people are walking off trail. I know that can be really hard to see and watch, especially in places that have delicate ecosystems, like wildflowers, for example. And just like bringing in a professional in a uniform to hopefully educate these people because most of the time they will not listen to you if you are not in uniform. And that creates conflict in my mind all the time.
Oh my gosh, that there's so much to unpack there. I feel like we could have a whole separate episode talking about this
Hmm.
particular topic. And I know you and I have talked about this a little bit in the DMs, but yeah, I think it's so tough, right? When you have a strong sense of justice and
Hmm.
inside your personal being and you personally have such great respect, especially when we're talking about the outdoors, like for the land, for our wildlife, for preserving nature, it can be so tough to kind of hold your tongue when you know somebody is doing something wrong, or to know kind of how to approach the situation. So I like your example of, maybe get someone in uniform to kind of do that for you. I've done that a couple of times up at Mount Rainier National Park. I've seen some things and I've gone and talked to the rangers. I mean, one time someone was flying a drone and I was like,
Hmm.
I can't talk to this person right now. I'm gonna go get a ranger and have them
Well,
come
a
have a
great
chat.
way a great way to diffuse that situation is, hey, I wouldn't do that. There's a ranger coming. And most of the time there are rangers patrolling on the trail, so like you're not lying. That
Yeah.
actually happened to me when I was in Arches National Park. This family wanted to take this giant rock from one of the arches. They wanted to take it home, and I was like, hey guys, I wouldn't do that. There's a ranger in the parking lot. And there was a ranger in the parking lot, so they put the rock down and scurried off.
That's super smart because also, even if there wasn't a ranger in the parking lot, they don't necessarily know that. But the threat of
Yeah.
someone official, coming and talking to them is always going to resonate more than just some random woman that they will probably
Yeah.
call a Karen. But I'm like, happy to be
Yep,
a
yep.
Karen if it's protecting the wildlife.
Yeah, yeah. If it's something like super egregious, like their life is in danger, I'm more than happy to be a Karen in the
Yeah.
moment. But, um, like for example, they're trying to pet a bull elk during the rut. Like maybe let's not do that, guys.
Oh my gosh.
I
No,
see
no,
that all the
no.
time in Estes Park. Like that, you
Oh
can
my
have
gosh.
charcuterie and watch people almost get gored in Estes Park.
No, I don't understand. That's so stressful and scary. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
just watch from afar, guys. You don't have to get that close.
Yeah, part of my job when I worked at Rackie was called Oak Bugle Corps, and we had to go out and be the deterrent for the visitors and the wildlife. So, like, we had to keep the wildlife safe from the visitors and the visitors safe from the wildlife. And that was just an insane part of my job. It was just pure chaos, and I thrived on it. Okay, I had 3 nights of Oak Bugle Corps a week. I loved it.
You're like, I've never felt more alive.
Exactly. Yeah, almost getting run over by bull elk every night. Love it.
Oh my God. Wow, I feel like you probably have so many stories to tell from all of that work that you've done. But there's something you said earlier when we first were starting to talk about like kind of your relationship to the outdoor community and outdoorsy and such. You said, you have a lot of great friends in this community, and I'd love to just dig into that of like how you have found belonging in the outdoorsy community and what your journey has been like there.
Yeah, so like I said before, my relationship with the outdoors has evolved greatly over time. And I am one that goes on a lot of solo adventures because I don't believe in waiting for the right person to go on adventures. But it doesn't mean you can't try to find people to go outside with, especially if you're a first timer getting outside and you're really nervous. Like, I still get really nervous and anxious to go outside. That was me in Du Bois, Wyoming last week when we were in grizzly country. um, it can be really terrifying. Like, I won't do that by myself. But when I was in my climbing 14ers every weekend phase, which, if you don't know, a 14er is a 14,000 foot plus mountain, typically in Colorado. There are a couple outside of Colorado, but that was in 2019 and 2020. But I found the community to be incredibly supportive. There are Facebook groups that you can join and post that you're looking for a hiking partner or find people who are looking for hiking partners, like women who hike. Um, I've had relatively good success. I won't say it's been all good because it hasn't, but I've found great hiking partners that way. Like my two favorite adventures were from that group specifically was somebody was looking for a backpacking partner to do the 4 Pass Loop in the Maroon Bell Snowmass Wilderness area, which that is a bucket list backpacking trip for so many people, and we did it in the fall, and that was just magical and beautiful, and just having the support of other women, it was so nice, and we did this really, really, really hard thing together, and we were strangers, and then we became friends, and that was really cool. And then another one we did with another lady that I found on there. We did a 3-day hiking adventure in the San Juan Mountains to do some popular lakes down in that area. And whenever that comes on my Facebook memories, I'm like, oh, that was such a good time. I really miss it. That was so great. I need to like talk to Allison again and see if she wants to go hiking. Um, but it hasn't been without its struggles though, and you do have to be careful. You have to vet the people that you go with. So like having coffee with them first is a great way to do this, or just hanging out at the park. Because I was actually ditched on my first two 14ers by the same person. The first time we went with a group, so the group split up, and I ended up being on the slower end with two girls who've never done 14ers before, and one of them got really bad altitude sickness, and she was puking everywhere, so I had to like play like first responder in that situation and get down quickly. Um, but luckily, the people on the mountain have your back because it's such a close knit community. And they will make sure that you get back to the trailhead safe and sound. So, like on the second one, when I did Mount Yale, I was ditched. I ended up on the Class 3 route by myself, the ridge route, which is not the one that you want to be on. There's like rocks the size of cars that I was scrambling on, which wasn't fun or safe, and I had no idea what was happening because it was only my second 14er. Um, but thankfully, there was this group of people, group of college kids who were up there having summit sandwiches, and they just kind of adopted me into their group and made sure I made it back to the trailhead.
Oh my gosh, there's so much from those stories that I want to dig in on. Okay, so first of all, being ditched on a mountain is very scary and terrifying. And like,
Hmm.
I am so sorry that happened to you. That must have been horrible. I'm so glad that you found people that could help you, excuse me, and adopt you.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I'm sure too but that probably taught you valuable lessons about like what you're saying about have coffee beforehand, maybe have these conversations beforehand about like, hey, if we're hiking in a group and someone is struggling or is lagging behind, how do we handle that? Like making sure that nobody is alone if the intention is to go out with a group
Hmm.
and to be together and that nobody's left behind is so important.
Yeah. And that can be tricky because you can have these conversations, but then the person can change their mind in the moment and just leave you. So just being prepared. Like, I luckily took a 14ers class through REI. Um, it was like a beginner 14er class, and they still do these in Colorado if you're interested. But I took a class, so I knew what to expect. I knew what to prepare for. So it's not like I was going out there completely unprepared, but it's just very jarring to be left alone on a mountain.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my gosh, that'd be really scary. But I'm glad that you did kind of that research and that prep beforehand. I know that there's a lot of people that will be listening to this podcast who have never done anything even remotely close. Like maybe they've never even gone on a hike before at all, 14ers aside. And they're thinking about kind of, okay, where do I even get started? Like, what is the first step that I even do? And I think the two things that I heard from you is, getting connected with local Facebook groups to see if there's other people that can join you on your first adventures is fantastic. And I know like we just launched a Discord server community too. So if Facebook isn't your thing, which like it's not my thing, there's
Yeah.
other channels and other communities you can get plugged into. So that's one way. And then the other way is finding these other resources and courses and stuff like REI and other organizations have available for you to kind of do that learning independently too prior is super important.
Hmm. Yeah. And there's also a bunch of smaller organizations. I just want to plug Colorado 14ers Initiative because they send peak stewards to go facilitate these things. And they also have peak stewards at the peaks. And they are responsible for helping to maintain and raise funds for these trails. So it's really special to be able to talk about it and share with a big audience, um, something that had a huge impact on me and something that I'm very thankful for. Which that led to me volunteering in trails. Like I volunteered for Rocky Mountain Field Institute in my home of Garden of the Gods. So that was really special and fun to be able to do something like that.
Oh, that's so cool. That kind of like perfectly leads into the next question, which is I really want to hear from you about kind of how you got into your niche of turning this into a professional career, how you got into really this area of expertise. It feels like you've had so many different unique roles and experiences, and I just love to hear about it.
Yeah, so I was always the Animal Planet child turned Nat Geo adult, turned outdoor professional, because it's just something that I'm so passionate about and I just love learning. Like I'm a lifelong learner, so it's something that I find really interesting. Um, and the psychology of it all is just, I love it so much. But the crux of how I became an outdoor professional was I was 22, working in a lab with those bright fluorescent lights that burn your eyeballs, with no windows. And I was working with a bunch of people who just kind of lost their ambition and they were just comfortable with where they were, and that's okay. That's totally okay if that's you. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I was so miserable. I'm an outdoor cat. There's indoor and outdoor cats. I'm an outdoor cat. Sometimes depends on the day, but mostly outdoor. But I started looking for other jobs, and I caught the hiring window for the Pikes Peak Highway at the perfect time, which was in January or February. So if you're interested, that's usually when the cities do their hiring. There's so many different agencies. I tried to explain this on my TikTok page, but it's just a lot, and some people still don't quite understand, and sometimes I don't either. But but yeah, for those who don't know, outdoor jobs typically have a hiring season and a hiring window, which is about 5 to 8 months before the job actually starts. So that's how I broke into working as a park ranger, and that was my big break into natural resources. And since then, so I did that for 2 years as a temp employee. So I worked through the winter as well. So plowing the Pikes Peak Highway in the winter, that was so fun. But I've also worked for the National Park Service as an interpretive park ranger. I did that at Rocky Mountain National Park, which is a place so near and dear to my heart, and ultimately why I had to leave, because sometimes you can be so passionate about something that it hurts you. And so that ended up like hurting me more than I felt like it was helping my goals and ambitions, and so I decided to um, apply for other jobs, and I recently got a permanent job in forestry. So now I have a 100% field-based job. So I'm outside all day in all types of weather, all types of terrain, anywhere from Colorado, Wyoming, South Dakota. We travel. And that's been really interesting and really eye-opening to see the world of forestry, because it's different than the park ranger world in so many ways. Um, and like different agencies have different goals. So it was really interesting to get into that. And I also started working on my Bachelor's of Science in Conservation Biology and Ecology last year after finding my true passion for this work. And hopefully I will be graduating sometime next year or early 2026.
Oh my gosh, you've got so much going on. This is
I know
amazing.
there's a lot going on, and like that's the thing. Like, there's no one path for everyone. That's what a lot of people want. Like, to become a nurse, you go to nursing school, you get a job as a nurse. That's what you do. You want to do marketing and product design, you go to school for marketing and product design. You get a job doing that. That's what you do. But working in natural resources, think of it as a tree with so many branches and so many leaves. Like, you can follow one and then, oh, I want to go over here into this branch and decide that I want to be this leaf today, which is kind of what a lot of people in my field do. Like, we're constantly mobile, we're constantly learning and moving and growing.
That's amazing. I think one of the things you said earlier was that you just love learning, and that sounds like that is the perfect job for you and the perfect environment for you, where it's just kind of like whatever piques your interest or whatever you want to learn more about, you can kind of have the flexibility and feel empowered to explore that more in your professional avenues, which is amazing and so unique for this particular industry.
Yeah, and something that I try to get through to people is you are not set in stone with the path that you chose. You can change it anytime, any day. It's up to you. Putting the wheels in motion might take a little bit of time. Like, for me, it took about 2 years of just thinking about it. Like, oh, I'm just thinking about it. I might do it, maybe not. But then I decided to just do it, and it was the best thing that I ever did.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So what other advice would you give to people who maybe are considering a career in whether it be, forestry or the national parks or just kind of the outdoor industry in general, but they don't know where to start. What would be the advice you would give them?
I would check out, especially if you don't have a college degree like me. You don't need a college degree to get into this field, contrary to popular belief. But looking at all the different agencies, it means you have to do a lot of work. But looking at your local city website, county, state jobs are usually pretty good. And then you get into the federal side of things, and there's also so many federal agencies. There's so many options, and I have a lot of resources on my page specifically. Like, there's pathways internships for people who are in school. There's SCA internships. There's trail building stuff. Like, you're not limited to one thing. So try it all, try everything, and see what you jive with the best.
Awesome. That's great advice. And then how would you say your experience has been with the general community, like with coworkers and bosses and colleagues? In general, how have you found the community of other people who are working in this space?
I'm generally very supportive. There's always the outlier where you might deal with some problems,
Sure.
like sexism at work.
Yeah.
But I would say it really just depends on the agency that you want to work for. Um, but don't let that deter you. There are pathways to recourse, like if you need assistance with some things, and there are always opportunities elsewhere. So, like if you're not feeling comfortable where you're at currently, then you can always go somewhere new and try that. And if that doesn't work, then try something. Just don't think like that it's not for you. It's just very much still a system. I'll just put it this way, it's still very much the good old boy system in a lot of ways, but some agencies like the Park Service are really working to change that
That's
and have
amazing.
more
And
diversity and inclusion. Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, I think that there have been a lot of strides forward and a lot of different avenues of just trying to push for more like diverse hiring practices too, which will help kind of change that culture as well too, right?
hmm And a lot of
So,
people a lot of people struggle with like the federal resume process, and they're like, "Oh, I've applied for this, but I've never heard back." Like that's pretty normal. But if you really want to game the system, I have a tutorial on how to make a federal resume, almost guaranteed to push you through that system. So uh, just follow the steps.
that's amazing. Okay, a little cheat code almost. Where can people find that?
In my beacons links
Okay.
on my TikTok page, and I also have like a playlist describing some of this stuff. I'm also working on redoing a lot of my videos. It's just finding the motivation and time to do that.
I totally understand. Well, for anybody who is listening to this podcast or in on YouTube, I'll have all of Mikayla's links in the show notes. So you can just follow those super easily. You don't have to remember a URL, but go through and follow those and go ahead and give her a follow on social media and stuff too, because she's got a lot of great stuff on there. So cool. I want to dig into kind of a related topic. We are talking about kind of belonging in this community and inclusivity and stuff. And I think that, the outdoor industry from a job perspective aside, if people are thinking about wanting to get started in hiking or just exploring the outdoors or whatever it might look like for them, one of the biggest barriers is that it's just so intimidating for so many different reasons.
Yes.
So what what advice do you have for those people who are struggling and just nervous to get started?
Yeah, so despite what you see online, you don't need the fancy gear or the fancy gadgets to get outside. Some places can feel far away from what people would consider the true outdoors. For example, a national park or forest. But I grew up getting outdoors in my t-shirt and sneakers. Going to the neighborhood park was considered an outdoor adventure, and it still is. So, of course, you should have items that will ensure your safety outside, like a rain jacket in rainy climates, or if it's going to rain that day, and shoes that you feel comfortable and safe traversing the terrain in. But many of these things can be purchased secondhand or on sale or obtained through friends. Like I loan a lot of my gear to my friends as well. And I love local gear shops. And I got a lot of my winter gear for leading snowshoe hikes in Rocky this winter from geartrade.com. Like, not sponsored, not a plug, but that's just where I got a lot of my stuff for really good deals. And then in terms of accessibility, which can be a huge barrier for people, I would just like to hit on something real quick because I know social media has changed the game in discovering spots. And I would just like to offer a side of the gatekeeping conversation that many people might not be thinking about. And I know you and I have discussed this a little bit in our chats and things, but something that a lot of people don't think about is that national parks and forests are constantly having their budgets cut. They're always having deferred maintenance, which means like no new buildings, infrastructure can't be maintained properly, even employee housing um, can't be maintained properly. They can't hire due to hiring freezes. because they can't decide on a budget or the budget was cut. Inability to find people that can live off of the salary in that particular area because most um, national parks and forests and things are in really popular tourist areas with an extremely high cost of living. Like I lived in Estes Park for 2 years, and that was not cheap. Um, and people say, oh, just build more park housing or housing for employees. You can't do that when you have deferred maintenance. So that's just a huge issue there. And then ranger stations being closed off entirely, and the current employees are having to do the jobs of so many people. And the budget is getting cut once again. And I just read an article saying that I believe it might be a 12.5% budget cut for the National Park Service. So 1,000 Park Service staff are going to lose their jobs or not be hired. So just take that into consideration when you're posting these places, and the other agencies that aren't as big as the National Park Service that don't have as much funding are struggling even more. So posting a video that goes viral can ultimately lead to negative impacts to an area that may not have the resources to handle hordes of new visitors, such as trash buildup, human waste. I urge you to check out the poop map on the USGS site from the Glacier Gorge corridor in Rocky Mountain National Park. If you just Google RMNP poop map, it'll come up on the USGS.gov site. Water and wildlife habitat quality issues can also occur. And so this can lead to areas implementing limited access, such as, dare I say it because I lived it for 2 years, reservation and permit systems, or being closed off entirely, like you just experienced with one of your favorite areas being changed from camping to day use only. So just be mindful of the impact that you can have and maybe rethink if the internet clout is worth the potential real world consequences for the staff and employees and people wanting to access that area in the future.
Yeah, I think this is another topic that you and I should probably do like a follow-up episode on because there's so much here to unpack. And I think this is a conversation I've had with other people with social media followings and really asking ourselves why we're posting what we are and like really considering the impact of it. I had a comment on a video that I made recently talking about that place that got closed for overnight camping and it's day use only. And someone commented and was like, well, it's because of social media influencers that these things are happening. And I was like, yes and no. I think that there's a part of it that is yes. I think that there are a lot of bad habits out there and bad behaviors out there of people just posting stuff, like you said, for the clout. But I do think that there are a lot of people like yourself and like me and like the majority of the people that I'm having on this podcast are also content creators in some form or another who do an amazing job of like educating around leave no trace and proper, waste disposal practices and things like this. So there is a trade-off, but yeah, we do have to think every single time we are either going out somewhere or posting photos on social media or whatever it is, we do have to think about that impact because even if we are behaving properly, I've had this conversation with a couple of photographers where they look like their photos are in wildflower fields, but they're on the path, but it looks like they're in the field. And my point to them is, hey, people who don't know, who are new to exploring the outdoors, don't know that you're on a path. If it looks like you're in the wildflowers, they're going to see your example and think that it's okay for them to do it too. So even though you're following proper leave no trace principles, they don't know that and they might not necessarily know. So you really have to be mindful of these things as you go out and start sharing your adventures online. Like there's a lot of potential negative consequences that can happen. And our services and our parks and stuff can't keep up with the like demand of
Mm-hmm.
increased recreation in these areas. They just can't.
There's been an exponential increase in visitation to our outdoor areas, and with all of these factors, it's just a recipe for disaster, really. It's really, I would define it as a crisis right now, and that's something that you could dig into deeper, or we can chat about another time because I could yap about that all day,
Yeah.
especially as somebody who's lived it and who's been working in that kind of environment. It's very stressful. It's not fun. And especially with time entry permit reservation systems, like just be kind to the staff, like because I like 8 out of every 10 visitors that I interacted with at the visitor center desk when I worked at Rocky, it was a de-escalation. And so that's not good for your mental health. And ultimately, that's why I said it was hurting me more than it was helping my ambitions and goals. It's just I would go home and sleep. That's all I would do. And so just like think of your impact when you're doing these things. And that's not to say you can't find cool spots online. And it's not to say that people are like purposely trying to hide like really cool spots from you. It's just like it's a really nuanced conversation to have, and like we can definitely chat about it more in the future, but just be aware of your potential impact. And I would say that is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think like the whole premise of this particular podcast is making sure that everybody feels like they belong in the outdoor community. But I will say there are some people who don't belong, and those are the people who are being disrespectful and intentionally unkind. Like park
Mhm.
employees, you're just trying to do your jobs. You're just trying to do your job, and
Yeah.
trying to do your best. And so people who are unkind and disrespectful, like there's no place for that. The outdoors are for everybody except for assholes. So, um, kind of like going off of this, because I think that with, you and I, and you especially, you have so much experience just and truly experienced boots on the ground, seeing this firsthand, being part of these conversations, understanding kind of the nuances and the background and all these contextual pieces of this puzzle. Um, so we think about this really deeply and have a lot of opinions, but for people who are not super ingrained in the outdoor community, but they want to kind of get started exploring the outdoors, whether that's at established parks or established park campgrounds, or if it's in the backcountry, or if it's more wild exploring, like what what advice would you give to them about like being feeling empowered to still go out and explore and feel welcome while also being mindful of the impact that they're making?
Yeah, the best way to have a good time in whichever place you're visiting is just simply reading the posted signage, knowing your rules and regulations before you go, like especially if there's a fire ban, and just being kind and courteous to everyone on the trail or wherever you're visiting, because I've gotten a lot of not good interactions like working outside, um, and just hiking as I guess a normal person on the trails that I would hike as a ranger. Just be open to being kind and follow the rules, and you're guaranteed to have a good time if you do those two things.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you'd probably second this too. Like I think when you first start out adventuring, you probably are going to make mistakes. You probably
Mhm.
are maybe going to forget to pack something, or maybe you're going to violate a rule that you didn't know existed. Like you went off trail and you didn't realize, like somehow you missed the signage, or something like that is going to happen. And I think just being open to like learning and being like, oh my God, I did not realize that that was the rule. Whoopsies, is the
Yeah,
best approach to have because we all make mistakes. I mean, I've made mistakes, you've probably made like it happens, but the
mhm.
best thing we can do is like just learn and try to do better in the future, right?
Exactly. And this is another conversation I would love to delve into deeper is leave no trace is a guideline. It's not hard and fast. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
think it is, but nobody's going to be perfect. Nobody's going to do it right 100% of the time. All that matters is that you try. Like there are some times where you might have like an emergency and you're not able to bury your waste. That happens. Learn from that. Don't do it again. Make sure you're prepared next time. But um or let's say like you accidentally got off trail, just be mindful of that. Research the route, download the trail that you're going to next time better. And then accidents do happen. Like the majority of search and rescues that my former colleagues participated in, a lot of them were for experienced individuals, not for inexperienced people. So That's a whole other topic, though. There's so many
Yeah,
other topics
that's
that we could delve into.
I know. I need to make a list after this, then we'll just schedule, a new podcast
Yeah.
episode every week.
This is why I want to do my own podcast eventually, but
You should. You really should. I feel like you have so much valuable and interesting insight, especially having done so much work in this industry. It's just such a unique perspective. Like you have so much knowledge to share. So,
well, thank you.
yeah, if you make a podcast, let me know and I'll be sure to
I
plug it
will.
to everybody here.
I'll definitely have you on for sure. We'll just be
Fabulous.
flip-flopping podcast guests.
Great. Perfect. Um, I want to get into kind of like how you define outdoorsy, but just before we move on, is there anything else that you want to say about just kind of making the outdoorsy community, the outdoor community more inclusive and welcoming for people?
Yeah, I think those of us who have been in the outdoorsy community for a long time should be open and willing to help others have a safe and fun time outside without being rude or condescending. There's nothing worse than asking a genuine question just to get shut down by a rude local or a know-it-all, and what I learned as an interpretive park ranger at the fifth busiest national park in the country is to always assume best intentions and to approach every interaction as an educational learning opportunity.
That's such a good reminder, and I've definitely fallen victim to kind of having a little bit of a hard exterior and feeling a little bit jaded of like, wait, what do you mean you don't know the answer to this question and why would you be here if you didn't know? But that's just not the right approach. The right approach is leading in a way in which makes other people want to follow you. So if you're answering a question in like a rude, condescending, know-it-all, elitist way, that's not going to make that person feel receptive to what you're saying, and they're not likely going to listen to you. So if you're relaying important information, especially if it's like safety information,
Yep.
do it in a way that they're going to actually listen to you and follow your lead. It's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, and just be aware if they're not receptive to you, they may not be receptive to other things in the future, and that could put them in danger. And so just putting your own personal frustrations aside, this is where I said the conflict happens in my mind a lot. Putting your personal frustrations and feelings aside, to give that person the best opportunity to be the best that they can be outside.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a good reminder. Yeah, I definitely am going to be taking that piece of advice with me because that's just it's so important and hard to do. But
Yeah.
yeah, really
Sometimes I
important.
struggle too, but
Yeah, 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 yeah.
we all do. We
So
all do.
yeah. Moving into kind of this next section here, talking about just how you define outdoorsy. I mean, that's been like the whole premise of this podcast is about how it looks different for everybody, and therefore there's not necessarily like one cookie cutter definition. But I'm curious, how do you define outdoorsy?
To me, outdoorsy is simply enjoying and appreciating the outdoors. I don't think it has to be
Yeah.
complicated.
Yes, that's a similar theme with other people I've talked to is that we define too much and we put too much emphasis on having this strict definition when in reality it's just different for everybody. It's just
Mhm.
great. That's the way it should be. What are some misconceptions or fears some people have about being outdoorsy that you'd like to clear up?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit ago that a lot of people think to be outdoorsy, you need to frequently visit or live near national parks, forests, and/or wilderness areas. There are so many urban outdoor spaces that I would consider outdoorsy, and parks tucked away in cities, and more are popping up with the popularity of the outdoors and green infrastructure. So, for example, New York City, I actually just got a comment from somebody on my TikTok saying, I live in New York City, there's no outdoor spaces. But New York City has a system of green spaces, also known as green infrastructure, that transform previous unused areas into relaxing outdoor getaways. So, even in the busiest, bustling city in the world, there are likely outdoorsy spaces for you to go to. So, reading a book in a park while listening to birds sing or watching the squirrel scurry around, to me, is just as outdoorsy as climbing a 14,000-foot mountain. While one is obviously more extreme and physically strenuous than the other, you are out there and enjoying and appreciating the outdoors both ways.
I love what you just said too, because I feel like oftentimes I know I have gotten caught up in the thought process of, well, if I'm not accomplishing a goal or working towards something or conquering something or, something like that, it doesn't count. And that's
Yeah,
just not true. That's just not true. You can be accomplishing literally nothing. You can be sitting outside and doing nothing, or you can be accomplishing reading a chapter in your book, or listening to a podcast or whatever it might be, and just existing outdoors. And that is being outdoorsy.
yeah, and even just sitting outside and watching and listening, that is accomplishing something. Like you are tending to your human nature, like your innate human nature. You are tending to that when you are just sitting and existing outside, not having anything to do, which I know can be tough in the digital age for a lot of people, myself included, which I have a lot to say about that at the end, but um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so true. And I know I've struggled with this, but like rest is productive. Just resting and doing nothing is good for you, and it is recharging and healing and important to make time for that. So, yeah, I love that. I think there's a whole conversation be had here too about like folks with disabilities or accessibility needs. Like they often feel left out of this definition of that outdoorsy community because they're not like able to do a lot of these crazy extreme sports and things like that. And it's like, no, you still are just as outdoorsy as someone like you're saying climbing a 14er. It's just different, and that's fine. That's totally
Correct.
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
So, what advice would you give to these people who don't typically consider themselves outdoorsy or don't identify with kind of the previous cookie cutter definition of the word?
Yeah, everyone has their own definition of what outdoorsy means to them, and if that's something you don't personally identify with, that's totally okay. And like you said earlier, we spend a lot of time constructing boxes in our minds with preconceived notions of who we can or can't be, um, whether that's influenced by self or society. But I encourage everyone to think outside of the box a little bit and to not limit yourself to definitions of a word or what you think it means.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I completely, well said. I couldn't say it better myself.
Thank you.
Um, so just kind of wrapping things up here. I know we've already kind of touched on this, so if you don't have too much else to say, like that's fine. But I do feel like you have a lot of interesting perspectives here about kind of balance, this kind of, how do we encourage more people to feel welcome and included in outdoor spaces while also balancing the need to preserve and protect our lands and our wildlife?
Yeah, so I have so much to say about this actually. But mostly we just need to be respectful, understanding, and most importantly, kind with the messaging. When people understand why something is the way that it is and can relate it to a personal emotion or experience, they are more likely to get involved in a positive way or have a positive interaction. So a great example of this is when I would have to ask visitors to please not feed the chipmunks and squirrels at Rainbow Curve in Rocky Mountain National Park. I tell them that the critters might be carrying fleas that have the bubonic plague, which is true, and the procedure for getting rabies shots, which is horrific. They would immediately stop engaging in feeding the animals. And now that I had their attention, um, I'd also explain that there are two types of fat that we all have: brown fat and yellow fat. Brown fat is what these little critters store to survive the winter, so do we, by eating nature's trail mix, um, whether that's seeds, shrubs, whatever they like to eat. And yellow fat builds fast and burns fast and is stored by eating junk food like Cheetos and human trail mix. So what happens if they have been fed junk food all summer? They could burn all their fat too soon and not make it through the winter. And so just using my authority of the resource to, for one, get them to stop engaging in the activity, and then for two, to get them to think a little bit about their actions and what they're doing. Because then at the end they go, "Oh my God, no, I'm not a murderer." Um, But I would just like to ask folks to please read and follow the posted signage. It is there for a reason. It's for your safety, most likely is the majority of the reason why. And if you don't understand the reason, a ranger or employee would be more than happy to explain. Most likely, like if you catch a ranger on a bad day and they're kind of short with you, just be understanding of that. Like I mentioned previously, we do the jobs of so many people. Um, but volunteering is a great way to get a glimpse into this world, and people in natural resources would be more than happy to chat if they have some time. And that's why I make the content that I do with the time that I have to be able to reach a wide audience of people who have these frequently asked questions, and so people can see a little bit of what it's like and to kind of like de-glorify it a little bit because it's not glamorous.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think the common thread here is just approaching everything with empathy and consideration and mutual respect, right?
I've seen a lot of lack of that these days, and I think those of us who are mindful of it need to just have that little bit of extra patience with others because, we did go through COVID and we're still going through COVID and other things, and the world is constantly changing. Just having that empathy for ourselves and each other.
Yeah, absolutely. What a good message to end on. That's just perfect. I feel very optimistic, and honestly, I've learned so much just from hearing you talk about all of these things. And I think if our listeners are wanting to learn more about your perspective on things, obviously if you start a podcast, let us know.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
in the meantime, like I said, all of your links and stuff will be in the show notes for people to follow you and engage with you and keep learning from you. But I also want to hear from you, like what's next for you? What upcoming projects, ideas, fun things you want to share with the group here?
Yeah, so not much right now because currently I'm just focused on finishing my bachelor's degree. That's my number one goal right now. It's just to finish that so I can hopefully secure a higher paying position because, it's just me, myself, and I over here. And also getting the hang of my new gig in forestry. Like, it's very physically demanding and that can be challenging for me. Like, I'm sure you know recently how it feels to be nursing some injuries that limit your usual abilities and struggling with, am I outdoorsy? What does that mean for me right now? It's kind of depressing. But getting out of that state of mind and getting into like, oh, I can just go hammock at my favorite spot and do my homework. Um, I don't post as much as I would like right now, honestly, and recently kind of been struggling with feeling motivated. There's like the ebbs and flows of content creation. But I am working on, like I said previously, some new educational content and like redoing a lot of my older videos to be more concise and thorough for TikTok. And I've also been trying to limit my scrolling time because I've noticed it negatively impacting my mental health. But if you have questions, I encourage you to check out my videos and playlists as well as my Beacons page. There's like lists of resources available if you're interested in getting outdoors and working in the outdoor industry, um, and all things natural resource related. And I will say, like, I don't know everything. I'm not the single source that you should go to for all of this information. I have a ton of lovely friends who are also in this field as well who offer different perspectives than me. So don't take what I say as the hard and fast truth because it's not. This is just my perspective and where I come from. Um, and also, all opinions are my own. um, but I hope you feel inspired to get outside in whatever way feels best for you. And I hope we can all be kind and understanding with each other. I like ending on that. That's a great way to end it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. Mikayla, thank you so much for joining on the podcast and for everybody who's listening. Join our Discord server too. Mikayla will be on there
Yeah,
and yeah, and be sure to connect with her on all of her other social media accounts and all the places she was saying before. Um, because yeah, just the more education we can all get and the more kindness that we can continue showing each other, the better. Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Mikayla.
yeah, it was so great to be on here and have these discussions. And there are so many avenues we could go from here, to discuss more in
Yeah,
the future. But
I'm making a list of all the additional follow-up episodes we'll need to have. So
absolutely, absolutely, because these are all highly nuanced conversations that require some background information and knowledge to be able to fully understand because I didn't know and fully understand until I got into the professional side of things. And so, like for those who are curious, like I will be more than happy to try to explain it to you. But the best way to actually like get a glimpse into it is to volunteer for your local park organizations, whatever like trails organizations, city parks, state parks, whatever floats your boat. Like I volunteer for the Rocky Mountain Field Institute and for the National Park Service. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, I've had incredible experiences volunteering with the Washington Trails Association. That was when you're talking about kind of urban green areas. I helped build a trail in the middle of West Seattle in a neighborhood that didn't have a green space within like a mile of it. And it's just cool, like getting to talk to all these people, and you build community through that too. This has come up on in some other conversations with folks about how volunteering, if you have the privilege of having the time to, be able to do that, is a really good way to just kind of like very low stakes get involved and start learning from people and kind of firsthand getting to see the back end of things while also enjoying being out in the field and enjoying nature. So, yeah.
Exactly. And for those who haven't volunteered before, usually organizations will post their schedule on their socials and their website. So just make sure to go directly to that source and see what kind of opportunities might be right for you and your time and your schedule.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Mikayla. I really appreciate you joining us. And for everybody listening at home, go follow her, engage with her on all the platforms, all the things. And we'll see you on the Discord server. And just remember that however you define outdoorsy, however being outdoorsy looks like for you, you belong out there.